4-part video series looking at what native speakers naturally do and how this knowledge can assist language learners. The first video considered the challenge of spontaneity in conversation. The second one looked at the production strategies of chaining language together, self-monitoring, conceptualization, and automaticity. This video will discuss the significance of pausing for speakers. Pauses. If I ask you what determines speaking fluency, I doubt if most of you would say anything about pauses. And yet, it is the placement, frequency, and filling of pauses that separates a fluent speaker from a non-fluent speaker. I'm not sure why, but many speakers believe pauses are bad. They think they should speak as fast as they can without pausing. I admit that I usually do not teach a lot about pauses until it comes to presentation time. Then I need to encourage students that pauses are not bad. In fact, pauses allow the listener a chance to process what was said. They also allow the speaker to plan out the next part of their story. Pauses provide emphasis. They help indicate what is more important than the rest. Furthermore, longer and more frequent pauses, when used correctly, can increase the drama of a story, whereas fewer and shorter pauses will increase the sense of action in the story. New instructors in the ESL/EFL classroom tend to make the mistake of slowing down their speech everywhere, believing it will be easier to understand. Instead, research is clear that saying words slowly is not nearly as helpful as regular speed chunks of language. In other words, the best way to help a language learner understand what you're saying is to add more and longer pauses in the appropriate places, which are after phrases and clauses. How do we know where appropriate locations for pauses are? Well, that's why we use commas and other punctuation in writing. Commas represent shorter pauses than periods, by the way. So when speaking, wherever punctuation might be used, put in a pause. Do not put pauses after every word, unless you're trying to emphasize them to make a point. Even then, in the sentence before this, I bet when you were listening, at first you thought I was emphasizing a point. But as the pauses continued after every word, you got tired of listening. Our brain cannot handle putting importance on too many words, so it will start to block new information when it's overloaded, which is another reason for pauses, to give our brain a chance to catch up. So, do not put pauses after every word. And don't put too many pauses together. How does this affect what we teach language learners? Well, we should teach them to speak in chunks of language, not just chunks that they have memorized, but even when they're talking spontaneously, have them try to articulate a phrase or a clause at a time. Besides helping them sound more fluent, it will also affect their pronunciation. One of the reasons English pronunciation is so complicated is because the same word will not always be pronounced the same way. Pronunciation of vowels and consonants depend upon the words that come before and after that particular word. Stress and intonation changes are based upon the placement of the word, its function, and whether it's new or old information. Have you ever listened to a non-native speaker who sounded like they were a machine gun or a robot? It's because they've not mastered the chunking of language with appropriate pauses and intonation and stress, so pronunciation can sound more natural when appropriately chunked. In summary, native speakers use pauses to allow the listener time to process information, use pauses to allow themselves time to plan the next part of their story, place pauses at the end of phrases and clauses, use pauses to emphasize some words, and use the frequency and length of pauses to add drama or action to what they're saying. In addition, non-native speakers should speak in chunks of language between pauses in order to improve their pronunciation. The next video will discuss the importance of turn taking.